You're listening to Through the Square Windows 2025 Christmas Special with me, Samira Ahmed.
Me, Graham Kibble-White.
And me, Mark Gatiss.
This is a podcast guiding you through the UK television we watched in decades gone by.
A bit about us. We both think about TV for a living. I'm a journalist and a broadcaster from a family of TV lovers. And a standout Christmas memory for me is watching Sting in Artemis 81, the night before I went on my first school skiing trip aged 13. Exciting times.
And I've been writing about and researching TV for over 20 years. And when it comes to Christmas, my greatest ever gift was received in 1984. A copy of Peter Haining's fat, hardback reference book, Doctor Who, The Key to Time, a year-by-year record. I was 11 years old and just owning it made me feel like an academic.
Now on to this month's episode, and we're doing something a little different. It is Christmas after all, so we've both selected our all-time favourite and least favourite festive TV specials.
And then in the last section of the podcast, we're going to travel to a mysterious, magical grotto, the home of actor, writer, director and fellow old telly fan Mark Gatiss. And he's also going to be sharing his own Yuletide choices with us.
Here then is what's nestling in our square-shaped snow globe this month.
All of you are an important part of my life, pal. I'm glad I could be here.
We interrupt our Christmas Eve carol service to bring you an important announcement. The world will end at 12 o'clock tonight.
You're called Gareth Hunt, aren't
Yeah.
you? Gareth is an actor's name. Is it your real name?
Now listen, Terry, you're going to have to bring all your experience to bear on this one and take it like an adult.
DC's wearing a wristwatch.
I wish I could see Motley Hall as it used to be.
Well, that was the Star Wars holiday special. The goodies, Russell Harty goes upstairs, downstairs, Minder on the Orient Express, That Darn Cat, and it'll become clear later on why there's a film in our lineup, and The Ghosts of Motley Hall. And before we dive into this week's shows, it's time for our post bag, and there's quite a lot to get through. We've had plenty of appreciation for Bob Monkhouse and his Full House game show, as featured on last month's episode.
Yes, we have Mr. Snodes, for example, who wrote, Bob lived local to me, and my sister used to serve him in boots. His reputation was very much for being friendly and charming to everyone in town, which is, I would expect nothing less. And Stuart Clary emailed to say, in follow-up to your discussion about Bob's Full House, the format did come back a few years later on ITV. The remake was called Lucky Numbers and was presented by Shane Ritchie. And he continues, you mentioned that Bob's Full House was meant to have a play-at-home feature. Well, Lucky Numbers did, as the Sun sponsored the show and printed bingo cards for its readers to play along. And another nice memory, I saw in a recent obituary of the DJ Tom Edwards that Bob gave him work as the voiceover in the game show Wipeout to help him out when he was struggling. And we have one other talking point, which was our conversation with author Richard Marson about the BBC Children's Department during the mid-80s. Yes, John Dredge, who's the co-host of the Funny Comics Fan Club podcast, wrote in to say, I sent a script to Edward Barnes, who was the head of the Children's Department at the time, and not only did he read it, but he asked if one of the jokes could be used in another show. That was my first ever writing credit at the age of 15. What an encouraging man. And actually, you say that's the only talking point, but there is one more talking point, isn't there?
There is. It's a big talking point.
Yeah.
So last time around, neither Graham nor I were very keen on Ray Davies's Channel 4 film Return to Waterloo, which caused a bit of consternation and messed with people's happy memories of it, didn't it, Graham?
Yes, it did a little bit. Yeah, someone who posts on Twitter as Colours of the Dark told us that they were taken aback by the negativity and asked, why bother covering it at all? Which is a fair question, I suppose. What do you think about that, Samira?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to be honest about how he responded to stuff. And it had a really rapey theme running through it, which I just think looks really weird. And sometimes our memories are challenged by seeing something afresh. And I would point out that Mary Whitehouse Experience pilot actually shocked a lot of people who thought they loved the show, but the pilot actually is quite weird. And the key thing is, we'd like to say to everyone who listens, is there is no right response. It's great and it's interesting that some of you will disagree, and we really want to hear that and why. And here's someone else who did disagree, David Thomas. He said you were so wrong about Return to Waterloo. It's a classic. He does put out quite a strong argument. He continues, all the themes are there. Mid-Thatcher anime, middle-age frustration, end of empire, ascendancy of youth culture, pressure of conformity. It's a classic, and we even get a Ray Davies cameo. And then here's where he really clinches it. Not to mention a pre-Ethel Gretchen Franklin appearance. Well, that is a strong argument. Yeah, it's still quite rapey, though. And David ends by saying, I watched this as a 15-year-old in Wales with a sense of wonder. Little did I know that I was to move to London and end up commuting on this line, a rite of passage in every sense.
Okay, now back to something we talked about in episode 2, which is Nightmare with AK, and that still seems to strike a chord.
Yeah, so Merlin Fulcher wrote to say, I grew up in the 1990s and I watched a lot of television, so your second episode was very fun. I really enjoyed the pace, a sense of joie de vivre listening to you both. Also the insights on public interest broadcasting at the time and the mention of Cyberzone. I remember watching this when I must have been 6 years old and perceiving a sort of aesthetic overlap with the video for Go West by Pet Shop Boys. What an era for culture. And I have got to say, Graham, I love that insight into the Pet Shop Boys aesthetic. He's right, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And Robert Ball kindly told us I love the podcast. And I don't know if this is interesting. Well, it is, Robert. But he says, I remember an ITV programme which was called Treasures of the Mine Lord from 1986, which now looks like the missing link between the adventure game and Nightmare.
And I have watched that YouTube link that you sent along, Robert, and I think you are spot on. And I think we shall have to investigate in a future episode.
Okay, lastly, we've got Michael Dennis, who's getting in touch, and he's actually only just listened to our first episode. But I'm glad to say he puts us back on the trail of Animal Quackers live performances, and I didn't feel we were done with this. I'm excited. What does he say, Samira?
So he says, I saw them at Derby Assembly Rooms around 1980 when I'd have been 6. I vividly remember the very top of the show as, before the curtain was lifted, a booming voiceover announced that the Animal Quackers spaceship is landing, while what I now know to be a follow spot was waved haphazardly across the proscenium arch. Thereafter, I remember not a thing.
Yes, and he does add, I spent my career working as a stage manager in the theatre, but I don't think that can be attributed to having seen this show.
What a wonderful postbag this
Yes.
one. Thank you so much, and do keep writing to us and letting us know what you think.
But let's begin a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
The Star Wars Holiday Special.
With Samira's and possibly all of planet Earth's least admired TV special.
Harrison Ford as Han Solo.
As you can tell, I've cheated already, Graham, because that's the Star Wars Holiday Special, which aired on November the 17th, 1978 at 8 p.m. on CBS in the US, not the UK. And of course, it was around Thanksgiving, though holidays there means Christmas too, doesn't it? And to misquote Star Wars, that's no moon, that's an exploding Death Star of a show. This notorious disaster featured Chewbacca's family and friends, lots of little kiddies among them, trying to celebrate some kind of Wookiee winterval. It included appearances by Han Solo, Princess Leia and Luke, and a host of American TV stars, including B. Arthur, Diane Carroll, who sings, and I think some French mime-like dancers. It is absolutely excruciating. I only came across it on YouTube a few years ago. It was understandably suppressed by George Lucas for many years after, and it has raised a terrible anxiety for loyal Star Wars fans. Is the holiday special canon? And I find it a useful reminder that Americans made terrible TV too. What did you think of this monstrosity, Graham?
It is terrible. I quite like Star Wars. I don't really care about Star Wars, so I don't have a stake in it, so it doesn't offend me. But I think the thing about this was I was expecting something sort of gloriously awful, but in fact it's awfully awful in that the opening sequence is Chewbacca's family, and there's no word spoken, is there, for about 50 minutes? It's all Wookiee howls as they're kind of running around a house. And I think let's just play in a bit of that for as long as we can bear to listen to it. And it's just, it's mind-boggling. It's, I can't even think what the thought process was behind this. I suppose it's very naive. It's very early in the Star Wars' life, isn't it? This came out just after the original film, didn't it?
Well, you say that. I mean, it's November 78, so you'd have thought they'd be well into making or starting work on The Empire Strikes Back, which of course was this dark masterpiece of the Star Wars film.
It's so strange. I mean, the other thing that I found quite appealing in a way about it is that it's all done on really kind of cruddy videotape. And yes. So this is sort of as if the Blake Seven production team were mounting a production of Star Wars in a way. And I thought it was quite a salutary lesson really because I remember, as a Doctor Who fan and a Blake Seven fan, one would always read about the producers at the time coming out of the cinema in 1977 thinking, gosh, well, it's all over for us now. But actually, it does show maybe they just needed to shoot everything on a nice kind of film stock to an extent, because it does everything a lot of favours. But here, even the Millennium Falcon looks a bit rubbish, doesn't it, inside?
I know. The whole thing almost looks like a parody of Star Wars.
Yes.
Like a cheap television comedy skit of Star Wars. But it's got a kind of earnestness to it, which makes the awfulness of it, as you say, not entertainingly awful, just embarrassing. It's really excruciating. It's very hard to watch.
George Lucas essentially came up with the concept. It's made by people who have no connection or handle on the property. And so it made me think of, I don't know if you remembered, through the 60s, 70s and 80s, there was a company called World Distributors who would produce slightly shoddy annuals based on big TV and film properties, and they'd be hurriedly put together by artists and writers who only had the merest connection with the subject matter. And the Star Wars Holiday Special feels like it's a World Distributors annual come to life. So it's really spurious. They've got a few bits of Star Wars stock to work with, and then they just try and fill it with other stuff. So, for example, there's this, I don't even really know who he is, this actor Harvey Korman from the Carol Burnett show, who I think was a sort of a comic face at the time, and he's there in multiple roles. And it seems really strange thinking, why are we making a vehicle for Harvey Korman when we've got Harrison Ford?
I know. Well, I think luckily Harrison Ford isn't in it too much, and I don't know whether they dodged a bullet and they did the bare minimum that they were contractually obliged to. They're sort of framing it, aren't they?
Yeah.
But there was a whole sort of attempt at a plot where there's someone from the an imperial officer. So it's like having a Christmas special where there's a Nazi who comes into your shop and is looking to buy some gifts, and you're having a whole chat with the Nazi about stuff. It's really strange.
And actually, when you say that, what you're sketching out, it could potentially be a Christmas special of Hello, Hello. And it sort of opens like a Croft and Perry sitcom, because you have these shots, don't you, of the cast all mugging to camera as their names come up. So that it's, I find it really baffling. Certain things that did impress upon me, though, for example, we're saying it's relatively early in Star Wars' life, but the fact that John Williams' score is already so iconic that they're riffing on it and doing things with it, I found that very interesting. They already know the power of that music, don't they?
Isn't there a song that Leia sings which puts lyrics to a John Williams melody?
A day that takes us through the darkness, a day that leads us into light.
Yes, there is. And I've read some accounts that actually Carrie Fisher insisted upon that she was going to sing. And again, it makes me think of Blake Seven, because apparently Stephen Pacey, who played Tarrant, I think for the last series, he did record a vocal version of the theme tune. I don't think it was ever released. But I just find this odd parity of thinking across these two sci-fi franchises.
That one day will be free.
As a journalist, and sometimes having to try and interview people related to big TV shows or write about them, there would often be a character called a brand manager who would get in the way of your access, or say, well, if you do, you have to refer to it this way and with an uppercase letter in the middle, all these kind of things. And you think, oh my God, I mean, who is this brand manager? What do they do? Well, this is Star Wars without its brand manager. And you can actually now see, okay, I now understand why you need a brand manager on these properties, someone who is going to hold it together and say, no, you've got to stay true to something, some semblance of our vision or what we think this property is about.
Yeah, so I'm sorry for inflicting that on anyone who's not come across it. It's best not to linger on it. Time now for my best Christmas pick, which is something so nice. And this was something that I've gone on about how my family had a VCR in 1975. So this is a show that we taped off BBC Two, and by this stage we had a Betamax VCR, not just the Philips top loader, and we taped it on the Thursday, December the 27th, 1977 at 9 p.m.
Goodies, goody, goody, yum, yum.
So it's The Goodies, episode 6 from series 7, Earthanasia. And the premise is the United Nations has decided the world is in such a terrible state that they're going to blow it up. And the whole episode takes place in a kind of closed room. The Goodies are in their office, and they hear about the news, and they're deciding how to spend the last half hour on Earth. And it's told in a high noon style real time. So I was really struck by how much of the humour is based on speed and the wit and their different characters. And I'll also make an observation, because, spoiler alert, it does end with the Earth being blown up. And I thought of a Doctor Who comparison, which is the end of, is it Earthshock, the one where Adric gets killed?
Correct.
And there's silence instead of music. And in this case, there's no end credits, and they even blow up the BBC ident globe to make it feel like it's the end of an era. What did you think of it, Graham?
I mean, I have seen this before. I haven't seen it for a long, long time. What I thought was, it really comes across how, to use a horrid phrase, but how match fit the three of them are. They really know what they're about, what they're doing, what their archetypes are. The thing I used to love about the Goodies, still love about the Goodies, is in regular episodes, the three of them would kind of come out in different formations, with one of them being the baddie for that episode and up to something crazy, and the other two would normally try and stop them. And this is a bit different because there's no real baddie here, but Graham he's the boffin, isn't he? He's the kind of the strong centre. You've got Bill Oddie, who describes himself as tearaway youth, which I think is quite fun. That how old was he at this point? Mid-30s, do you think? Or is it, does the beard age him? Early 30s. Yeah. He's tearaway youth. And then you sort of got Tim Brooke-Taylor's kind of this feckless, spineless, juvenile, jingoistic, but somehow lovable, sort of
sexually repressed.
Yes, idiot in the middle of it all. And I just like the fact that they knew there was enough mileage from those three characters to really let them just walk through a whole episode. I think it's great.
And the cultural reference is always fun. So, Bill is planning to go off and shag till the end of the world. So he's got Jane Fonda. He's always having to delay going to see it because there's always something holding him up. But I love all those little references to who would be, the fantasy woman that the Bill Oddie character would fall in love with. And there's a lot of Union Jacks in this, I think, or I have this idea of Union Jacks because Tim Brooke-Taylor's character was always sort of, as you say, nationalistic, in a kind of charming way and jingoistic. But he's also frightened of nudity. And there's they do some Freudian analysis on him, and he suddenly comes out, he's got a special, what do they call it? They call it an A string. That he's covering his belly button.
Yes, yeah.
And because obviously it's too rude for it not to be covered up. And I just remember my sister used to go around the house chanting, "This is not nakedness.
This is my belly button!"
And it became a family refrain.
Wash your mouth out!
And that was the kind of thing that we did when we taped shows off a TV. Now, I have to say, I did actually ask Graham Garden about the story behind this episode. And it's so interesting because there are other episodes like this. It's to do with budgets. So this is what he said. The inspiration for the show, well, that was largely budgetary. We found that we'd used up the filming budget for the whole series with one episode still to go. So it had to be entirely studio-based. This had happened before with the Lighthouse episode and The End. So we had to think of a plot where we were trapped in a single set, the office, with an existential threat to deal with. The end of the world struck us as a pretty good motivation for a desperate and ridiculous reaction. Bill's beard coming off, and you should say, he suddenly goes off and shaves his beard, and you realise it's Bill without a beard. It's amazing. So Bill's beard coming off struck us as a great way to unhinge the audience's familiarity with the character and show we were really committed to the end of the world narrative. There was a nervous moment just before that scene as the tapes were checked to make sure we'd recorded everything and no retakes were needed, after which Bill disappeared and the makeup department gave him a speed shave. When he came back on set, Tim thought he looked like Liza Minnelli. The studio sent episodes of some of our favourites as they were very much based on character comedy, giving us a chance to do some real performing rather than just falling over. So Graham Garden, thank you so much. And we should say we plan to feature Graham Garden on the podcast in an upcoming episode.
And what do you think the recording would have been like for this? Because it really does play out like a studio sitcom that sort of knows it's a studio sitcom. They're nearly breaking the fourth wall, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, the bit that I really love is when they're trying to work out how many birthdays and Christmases they can cover, and everyone's and Graham's making notes, says, right, we're going to celebrate your birthday at 11:43 and then Christmas at 11:45. And this sense of time running out on them, I just think it's beautiful. I mean, I presume they rehearsed it very carefully before doing it because it has to run and edit down into real time, and they don't feel like there are that many edits in it. I mean, it really feels like one of those great shows which is just delivered like a Christmas special should be, with the audience there to enjoy it.
One thing I want to sort of particularly tip my hat to is Graham Garden's ability as a mimic. And let's just listen to him as he does really the entirety of the Muppets. It's incredible.
Hi there, frog lovers. Very good to see you. Welcome to the Muppet Show. And here I'd like to introduce to you Miss Piggy.
Well, she's got to be real anyway. They're a wide front and a mop head.
Oh, my dear. Frog of my heart. Hi there, Miss Piggy. What can I do for you?
Fuzzy Bear is a woolly jumper with a hat on.
Kermit, fun me. Oh, boy. Those two old guys don't handle me.
Boo, boo, the bear's a comedian. The comedian's a bear. Boo, boo, boo.
Lies! Halfway up the stairs.
And so that is quite a facility he's got, but it wasn't really employed a lot. I mean, he used to do Eddie Waring, didn't he, I think, sometimes in the Goodies, but it wasn't a standby for the Goodies a lot, was it?
I don't know. I mean, I think over the years, if I went through the whole box set, which of course I have, you'd find that they have their favourites that they can do. And of course, he'll do Scottish characters, won't he?
Yes.
I know that Graham said that when they first, if you look back at the early episodes, they did have a character actor who would be the villain. And then they realised that these character actors would get all the best lines and laughs.
Right.
And of course, they thought, why not give it to ourselves? So actually then you get a shift and it starts to be one of them who becomes this monster and has to be stopped by the others. I thought that's quite an interesting development too.
That is interesting. The other thing is that we were talking about the nature of this and how it's, to use a really kind of criticky term, but it's a character piece. But I think the Goodies really normally, they use a kind of cartoony sense of humour, which is great. And you wouldn't think it would suit a ruminative story like this, but it really does. And I really like the cartoon logic still exists though. So we have that great gag with the Radio Times where the TV listings after the end of the world are all blank.
That's right. They're trying to convince Tim that it's really true the world's going to end. And of course, it doesn't make sense if it's just been announced, but it does make sense within the logic of the world's going to end after midnight. So the rest of the pages of the Radio Times are completely blank and they go through it in front of him. It's brilliant.
The last thing I suppose I would want to ask you is, does this feel Christmassy? I know it's set around Christmas. There's a Christmas tree. Is it a Christmassy episode, do you think?
It's a good point, because I would have watched it a lot, not just at Christmas. But the fact that it went out around Christmas tells you so much about what you could do with television. And people weren't afraid to make an episode like this, which felt dark. And, this is the era of, we're a year away from the Winter of Discontent. But I just think British audiences in particular, but I think American audiences too, they'd had the big oil crisis, hadn't they, were kind of used to things being difficult. And so you could take something quite dark as part of your entertainment. And I just... Yeah, it's technically not. Well, there's tinsel. They have a tiny turkey, which is left after they cut all the feathers. I mean, there are lots of Christmas jokes in this. Actually, what I found really charming was, there's a lot of jokes about how Christmas is spending time with people that you hate, that you have to spend time with. And it sort of references Christmas in all the right ways. The idea of being trapped in a room with people, which is how people often feel at Christmas, don't they?
Well, we also asked you to get in touch with your Christmas selections.
David Houston, who tells us he's aged 72 3/4, emailed us to say, in my opinion, Christmas TV just doesn't get any better than 1984's The Box of Delights. I know there are lots of us loving fans of all ages who watch it annually. It was a sheer delight then, and it still is now. It's Christmas TV and children's TV at its very best.
And actually, my brother Jack tweeted us a similar sentiment about the Box of Delights. He describes it as the quintessence of Christmas, particularly its title sequence and music. But back to David's email, and he continues, I also love A Child's Christmases in Wales from 2009 with the wonderful Ruth Jones and Paul Kay. It's harder to get a hold of this to watch it again, but I loved it at the time.
BBC Scotland's Craig Williams tweeted, All Star Record Breakers was never less than brilliant.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky.
But my least favourite is any Christmas special where they go somewhere hot, like summer holiday ads on Christmas Day. It's just wrong and kills the atmosphere. And I'd say Craig on this, we both definitely agree.
Now, rather interestingly, a separate Craig Williams entirely also got in touch saying the Fast Show Christmas special is a rare thing where I can only watch it at Christmas.
Lee Wall told us the first Royal Family Christmas, as in R-O-Y-L-E, first Royal Family Christmas special is excellent. It perfectly encapsulates the spirit and humour of the show.
What if the baby doesn't like me? What if I don't like the baby?
Of course you'll like it. You'll love it.
In contrast, the later ones really miss the mark and lose the heart and realism of the characters.
Stuart Manning, who created our podcast graphic, selects Christmas with the Addams Family from 1965.
Snow? But it isn't snowing outside.
By George,
The real Santa must have gotten here while their backs were turned.
Which, he explains, is an episode spoofing the I Love Lucy Christmas special from the 1950s. To persuade the kids that Santa really exists, all of the family independently decide to dress up, leading to a final shot of them as a group of Santas.
And the TV and audio writer Eddie Robson says, the one thing I make time to watch every year is the Nightingale's Christmas episode, Silent Night. Now, Graham, I have to confess, I'd never heard of this one. What was it?
It's quite an obtuse Channel 4 sitcom.
Obtuse or obscure?
I would say obtuse, because it's very odd, kind of very hard to get into. And it's about three night watchmen. And it starred Robert Lindsay, David Threlfall and James Ellis.
Right, well, Gail Thornton nominated what she described as Mrs. Brown's Bleeding Boys as her worst Christmas fixture, and the Royal Institution Christmas Lectures as her favourite. Classy choice, Gail. Lord Reith would be very proud.
And finally, Chris Benson goes for Chaz and Dave's Christmas Knees Up from 1982. He explains a mock pub and a guest appearance from Eric Clapton. I had a quick look at this, and it opens with the Sideboard song. It includes a stand-up set from Jimmy Cricket.
I love Christmas. I think we should have it every year.
And it features, of course, pop's finest ever song, Ain't No Pleasing You. So as such, and even though this isn't a competition, I'm saying Chris wins this battle of Christmas TV titles.
I think he does, absolutely. Well chosen, Chris.
There ain't no pleasing you.
Right, it's time now for your picks, Graham, and I must say, you did not disappoint me. Both are quite meta.
Good evening. I hope you're having a happy Christmas, despite the fact that, for many of you, life can never be the same again. Last weekend, the lights were dimmed on this set for the last time. Mrs. Bridges set off with Mr. Hudson, her new husband, to find a new life at the seaside, and Lord and Lady Bellamy left London for good for a life of ease. James was gone, and Georgina was finally married to her lord. And as Rose closed the door of 165 Eaton Place, upstairs, downstairs, passed into history. Or did it? Come with me. Christmas being what it is, maybe we can work a little magic and summon up the spirit of a certain Christmas past.
That was Russell Harty laying out the premise for Russell Harty Goes Upstairs, Downstairs, which aired on ITV on Boxing Day 1975 at 11:15pm, 5 days after the venerable British drama series created by Jean Marsh and Eileen Atkins had broadcast its final episode. So this odd half hour finds our hero on the set of 165 Eaton Place, seemingly moments after the production has wrapped, and there he engages in profoundly odd, borderline belligerent conversations with the cast, who all seem to be confused about whether or not they should be responding as their characters or as themselves. And so, yes, I have selected this as my least favourite Christmas special.
I was going to say, I just wanted to check this was your least favourite.
It is.
Because it is odd. I mean, I quite enjoyed watching it just because I couldn't quite believe it was put out. No one worked out that there was something fundamentally misconceived about it. Russell Harty's poking the belly of one of the actors and telling him he's put on a bit of weight. I mean, you were right when you said borderline belligerent. Yeah,
okay, well, let's talk a bit about that. I mean, I have to confess, I do think it's bad. I am still slightly fond of it. I'm a little bit torn. But I mean, it is demonstrably bad. He accuses David Langton of being unlordly. He asks him, were you what they call a dropout? He calls him portly. He slaps his stomach. He accuses Joan Benham, who played Lady Prudence Fairfax, of giving him withering looks in the LWT canteen. He wants to know if Gordon Jackson is threatened by Gareth Hunt.
You don't view him as any threat?
I mean, maybe this was his charm. He was so blunt. But watching, I also feel like this is just a man panicking who hasn't done his prep and doesn't really know what he's going to say next. What do you think?
Yeah, it is interesting. It's like he's walking through it all with a sort of a bubble of coldness around him, because the set looks fantastic, and it's a real insight into how this kind of TV was made, with these big sets that the camera could follow people through. So they were like plays, a lot of the recording, and you go from room to room. They're all sitting around smoking and drinking. Then there's a room where he goes down into the basement kitchen to sit with the servants. So, as a piece of technical achievement, it's really impressive to watch. And all the actors are acting their parts, even if, as you say, sometimes it's confusing as to whether he wants them to be who they really are or the roles they're playing. And they're switching between the two very professionally, I would say, and very politely considering.
I would say politely. I mean, let's listen to one bit actually where, again, poor David Langton, let's just listen to how they segue between talking about his character and the real David Langton.
Are you what they call a self-made man?
Yes, Bellamy was self-made. Are we talking about Bellamy or David Langton? Me?
I think let's talk a bit about David Langton, since you've overwhelmed me with your Bellamy.
So, yeah, my problem is, and again, it comes with this whole sense I have of it being underprepared, is that no one seems to know what the rules are here. Are they answering in character or as themselves? And Harty's questions don't really help. He asks really broad questions as well. He asks Langton, do you have anything secret and private, as a question. It just seems desperate. And at other times there are sort of plot points in here. So the cast have conspired a gag where they get Harty's name wrong, and there is also a sense of a script in that they have to be ushered from one setup to another. And sometimes, doesn't it, that is a problem because it crashes into a few real conversations that he does manage to get going.
Yeah, that's right. So there are points where you think, he's just starting to get an interesting response and an insight into some of these people now. And then it's suddenly comes and goes, we've got to go back upstairs. So it's edited very tightly. It is only half an hour. But it doesn't feel like it was recorded from a much longer thing and cut down. It just feels like they set up the structure of it. No one actually puts much thought into the content of it. That would be led entirely by his questions. And obviously, I don't get a sense that there was a producer who was going through what he was going to be asking in each room. He just seems to have wandered from room to room and slightly picked on people, I feel. It does feel quite mean.
So he wrote a piece, actually. I was having a look at some old TV Times. That's what I do sometimes. And Harty actually wrote about putting this together. And he wrote, I've worked in the small Dream Factory, which is London Weekend Television, where Upstairs Downstairs is made, and shared the same studios for the past 3 or 4 years. In all that time, I've never seen anyone from Upstairs Downstairs in the canteen. Mr. Hudson has occasionally jostled an arm in the milk queue, but on the whole, they were like a club. He explains that the programme was shot in mid-July and it was genuinely on the final production day for Upstairs Downstairs. And then he writes, and this I find ironic, he writes with a sensitivity that I don't think he exhibits at all on screen. He writes, the atmosphere was, to put it mildly, strained, tense and nervous. Not that kind of tension you feel when things are going wrong and lights are going out and people are forgetting words. It was another kind of feeling, a mixture of end of term and maybe the beginnings of a new life outside. And then most notably, and this is the real, I could have boiled it down to this, but he also talks about the cast sitting in a deep freeze of disapproval as recording actually started on his show. And he talks about his attempts to chip away at that. So I feel it's a bit of a hostage situation. And I've read that Jean Marsh, for example, regretted doing this. But actually, should we talk a bit about Jean Marsh? In fact, should we listen to a little bit of Jean Marsh? Because she's probably the most interesting contributor here.
Now, in a sense, the end of this programme is the end of almost the death of your baby, isn't it? Or your baby's growing into a mature child and fallen to the wayside.
Jean Marsh is so fascinating, isn't she? And the thing that I found most interesting of all in the interview with her was she talks about how, she and Eileen Atkins created the whole show, but I think there's reference to, not that we've made money out of it. Or
initially, I felt quite conceited about it and thought it's a good idea and yes, it'll do well. But I only thought of 26 episodes in England. I didn't think of 5 series and a spin-off in America and a musical, and it's shown all over the world, and other people, not us, make millions and millions of pounds out of it.
But you don't begrudge them that, do you?
No, of course I don't.
And you just wonder what was the arrangement, that this is their intellectual IP, and yet it feels like they're just treated as jobbing actors in it. I was intrigued.
And what do you think the sense is? So, we're saying this is December 75, when she says England's crumbling.
But everyone says England's crumbling, and I don't want to crumble with it.
What's going on? What's on her mind?
I'm wondering if this is part of just what the economic chaos at the time. Is this around the time of high inflation where prices would be going up twice a day kind of thing? Super tax. It's probably a strange time if you're earning a half decent salary and inflation's eroding it. And I imagine this is also an era, a lot of strikes in television, because of the unions were often going on strike over various things.
So, and the other thing that comes to mind, I suppose my last question to you on this is this a good premise for a Christmas special? Do you think it could have worked? Do you think it's a nice idea?
Well, given how beautifully Russell Harty wrote in that article you quoted from TV Times. He obviously did have the sensitivity to have done something more thoughtful. I wonder if it would have benefited from being more of the way that the BBC and ITV do it all the time now about a much-loved intellectual property. They would do a big, lovingly produced documentary, with a celebrity interviewer going on set. And you could have done it that way. Because I quite like the mince pies coming out of the kitchen table, and all the servant class around the kitchen table together with Gordon Jackson and so on. I thought there were hints of what might have been, but I think it shows that there is no substitute for having someone, a presenter at the heart of it, who genuinely has done their homework and I just didn't get the sense that he really cared. Maybe he did care about the show, but everyone's feeling awkward for different reasons, none of which are properly explained on camera, and that's the reason it doesn't work.
So from a fictional house in Belgravia, my plum Christmas pick, which we're going to now, whisks us off onto the international travel scene.
Morning, my dear.
Dennis Black Beauty King's wonderfully bouncy and propulsive music there from the opening scenes of Minder on the Orient Express, which aired on ITV on Christmas Day 1985 at 7:30pm. Now, this 90-minute special, written by Andrew Payne, who would go on to create the BBC's gastronomic-themed detective show Pie in the Sky, represented ITV's big push for the festive season. It even got a TV Times cover. It followed Dennis Waterman's Terry McCann and George Cole's Arthur Daly, who through various complications end up on board the Orient Express alongside an all-star cast of characters who all have their own nefarious reasons to be there. And they include Amanda Pays as the private school educated daughter of a deceased London gangster who is now hoping to crack the code that leads to his long-forgotten Swiss bank account. Honor Blackman, Ronald Lacey and Maurice Denham, who all have their own secret links to the deceased criminal. Adam Faith is a hitman who mistakes Arthur for his intended target, and Ralph Bates is an outrageously accented Interpol detective who, alongside Patrick Malahide's Sergeant Chisholm, is attempting to surveil the entire criminal ensemble. I have to ask you then, because we haven't discussed this at all, did you enjoy Minder on the Orient Express? What did you think?
I absolutely loved this. Minder I was very aware of, but I never really watched it. And I thought excellent writing. I loved the 50s style banter. There are lots of jokes about Kazis and birds, and the villains are yuppie villains with posh accents. And I basically thought it was like a brilliant comedy version of The Long Good Friday.
Yes.
Complete with a lot of knives, which would be really problematic now to have like fights in which people are pulling knives on each other.
I think this special, there's nothing Christmassy about it, is it? It's not set at Christmas.
But it's set somewhere exotic. I mean, well, you say it's a lot of it's shot in London. And the premise is this woman whose father was a gangster who died 10 years ago, had left the code for his Zurich bank account, where all his money's stashed, in some kind of complicated way, and he has to piece it together, and everyone's after her to get the money, and they've all got different reasons, as you hinted at. So a lot of it is actually shot on them getting on the train that runs from, is it Victoria, to Southampton or Folkestone, wherever, and then to get on the boat. And then they get on the train at the other end. And it's all it's very mid-80s kind of Laura Ashley sailor frock style high fashion. Honor Blackman's there trying to seduce George Cole. And it's all shot in these tiny, tiny cabins. I don't know how they filmed it.
I mean, it looks beautiful. I think the plot, no pun intended, does come off the rails towards the end. But early on, there's some really incredible storytelling moments. For example, we have a scene where Adam Faith's hitman is pushing his way through the queue to board the train. And as he's doing that, he's elbowing aside all these characters who we're going to come to know as the tale progresses. And it's just a lovely way. It establishes his menace, but also it's a bit of an intro for everyone else. And then similarly we get, and we need to talk a bit more about George Cole, but we get Arthur Daly boarding the train. And as he does that, he walks through someone's photo opportunity, raises his hat, he bumps into two yuppies, and then he also helps himself to a glass of champagne as he pushes through a party who are celebrating. And I just think the economy at the start particularly is, you don't need to watch any Minder, do you, I think, to get the sense of who these people are.
No, and I think, if you've watched, I'd watched a lot of George Cole's earlier films with Alistair Sims, things like, the St. Trinian's film, so he played Flash Harry. And it's that kind of comedy. It's very Ealing comedy, isn't it? It's sort of the well-timed physical joke as much as the wit, and the camera framed just the right way. Everything's timed beautifully, and it's done so economically. I absolutely loved this. It was hilarious.
The music. So this is something I find fascinating about this, because it really does feel like a big screen version of a TV show, to the point that things are slightly translated and so it doesn't feel like a regular episode of Minder, but it feels like a brilliant episode of Minder. I think George Cole reckoned it was his favourite, but they ditch the iconic theme tune and it's not even referenced, and instead we've got, as I said, music by Dennis King, who was the composer for Black Beauty amongst other things, but it makes it sound like a caper, doesn't it, the music?
Well, that's the international travel scene for you, isn't it? Strange bird, a costume, a carsey. We're not even out of Brixton yet.
Do you think it is more like, Murder on the Orient Express kind of feel? And there's George Cole references Agatha Christie, doesn't he? Or I think the Dennis Waterman character references Agatha Christie when he's trying to explain why you would get on the Orient Express. That there's a sense of stepping into a glamour. There's an association with crime and caper, but it is shot on an ITV 1980s budget. So although it looks fantastic, the storytelling is great, it doesn't look as sparkling as some of those Agatha Christie films. It does look like a high-budget TV show.
No word of a lie, Arthur here was hanging on the outside of the train, weren't you, son?
He'll do anything to get out of buying a drink. Look, as I've already explained, this huge American ice cream grabbed hold of me, chucked me up against the door.
Tell him about the gun. Go on.
I'm coming to that.
With a silencer.
The ending to this, I think, is sublime, which is we have Terry and Arthur and Amanda Pay's character back at the Winchester, so sort of, back to where it all begins, back in their local booze, as Rycott tries to serve Arthur a subpoena.
Arthur, Rycott has still got that subpoena. Try the back door.
And it's really joyous. And, again, Arthur is then on the run from the Rozzers.
Oh, God almighty, Mellish, come on.
I am finished with you, Rycott Jones.
I think our policemen are wonderful.
And as they're running off, Terry and Arthur just look at each other and it freeze frame. And they're just, despite the fact that Arthur has come in between Terry and his most recent girlfriend and broken them up and completely subverted all of Terry's good luck, there's just such love in their eyes for each other, isn't there, in that final freeze frame as the music starts?
Yeah, no, it's an absolutely true bromance. It really works. Is it around this time that there's when does Only Fools and Horses have its big Christmas special?
Well, now that's a good question. It's a pertinent question because Only Fools and Horses had its first ever feature-length special this Christmas at exactly the same time. It was a big thing. It was kind of the battle for Christmas Day, and I'm sad to report that for Minder on the Orient Express, it turned out it was right programme, right time, just the wrong location, which is being up against Only Fools and Horses to Hull and back. So Only Fools actually got 16.9 million viewers and Minder got 12.5 million, which I think is unjust.
Yeah, but that's not bad though, is it? I mean,
it's not bad.
That's 28 million people were watching one or the other, and it wasn't that far apart.
The other thing I find interesting about this, and I think there's a slight sense of it in the show, is it was reported at the time is it was going to be the final Minder episode. And, even to the point of the cast giving interviews. So Dennis Waterman had said, I won't miss Terry even though I've enjoyed playing him. If you're an actor, you get used to leaving roles behind and going on to play new characters, provided, of course, that you're lucky enough to be offered work. What I will miss is working with George and the rest of the Minder crew. And George Cole had said, I think we've taken the characters as far as we can. By calling it a day, we're quitting while we're ahead, although Terry and I would still like to do a Minder special from time to time. So what happened next is that another one-off followed on Boxing Day 1988, and then actually a further full series with Dennis Waterman. And then Gary Webster came in because Dennis Waterman left the show. Although I was digging through my own kind of archives and I interviewed Dennis Waterman in 2015, and he actually said to me that he never left Minder, he just didn't come back. And what he means by that is when production began again for the 1991 series, he was already committed to other work. But this is a long way around, I suppose, of me asking you, if it had ended here, that's quite a fine ending, don't you think?
I think so, because it ends with the possibility of this new romance, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which is quite sweet with this posh bird.
Yeah, and this kind of summing up of Terry and Arthur and what they're all about and what they mean to each other. I think that final freeze frame, I think, would have been a nice way for it to bow out.
Yeah, well, it's like Butch and Sundance, isn't it?
Yes.
The only thing I would say is I did once see George Cole, and this would have been about 6 years later. And when people won the pools, if they were willing to go public, they got them and they did a big photo opportunity with the press. And I was working at the BBC at the time. They sent me down just to cover it for all the regional networks. And this couple came down and they filmed them at the Jack Barclay Rolls-Royce garage on Berkeley Square and getting their check. But it was George Cole as Arthur Daly trying to sell them a dodgy car, and they'd brought in this really run-down old car and they'd put it in the Jack Barclay garage. It was, the couple looked a bit, the way that people look dazzled and confused when they've just won millions and they're surrounded by photographers. So it was quite an odd moment, but George Cole was such a professional. He'd come in the costume and everything, so I suspect he made a lot of money out of those kind of appearances.
Have a cracking Christmas at Woolworth, the cracker of a Christmas shopping spree.
When you first suggested doing a Christmas special, I said straight away, we have to show the adverts, because a big part of watching Christmas TV on ITV at least was the adverts, was it not?
It was. And then when we're talking about Christmas adverts, well, it can only be one thing.
Woolworth prices, many of them cracked down Christmas. Woolworth is the place to be.
A festive giant was waking on the high street in 1976 with the arrival of the first in a series of celebrity helmeted TV adverts for the British superstore chain Woolworths.
And these ads, which had run up until Christmas 1983, were almost as big a part of the holiday season as the Morecambe and Wise special or a James Bond film on ITV, which is definitely why we want to celebrate them. But first, Graham, give us a bit of background.
There's a time for giving, yes, a time for buying presents, though it's hard to find enough time to spare.
OK, well, I'm drawing on the fine research work of Steve Berry here, who wrote a piece on the Woolworths Christmas adverts for a magazine I once edited. TV years. Those were the days.
It's a great issue as well, if I may say so. I was consulting it in preparation for today.
Thank you. The story is essentially that in 76, Woolworths brought in advertising agency Allen, Brady and Marsh, ABM, to revamp their on-screen presence. And the company had been responsible for memorable campaigns such as Milk's Got a Lot of Bottle, This is the Age of the Train and R. White's Secret Lemonade Drinker. Their first efforts for the retailer featured Leslie Crowther touring one of their stores.
Every Christmas, Woolies brings pleasure to the kids and value to their parents.
Highlighting their range and interacting with the cast brought in to play customers. So that was Christmas 76, but from 77 onwards, these ballooned into celeb-packed affairs, dozens of familiar faces scampering around a beautifully appointed shop.
Thousands of presents you can choose from.
The running time of the ads would also balloon into 2-minute epics that took up the entire commercial break. And 1978's effort featured 23 celebrities and cost £12,500 per second to make.
There was almost something semi-socialist about the idea that we all shop together in a one-stop shop. So you've got Ed Stewpot Stewart looking at the jumpers. The thing, product-wise, that I noticed is that there's a lot of people looking at blank cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And this is the era of home taping is killing music. And also, there's a lot of knives.
Yes, there is. So I had a look and I made a note. So, for example, Windsor Davis, he is shopping for a Binatome home entertainment system, which is a wonderful thought. Harry Worth is taking receipt of a clock radio. David Jacobs is assembling home pack furniture. And yes, it's kind of, as you say, it's like a utopian view of consumerism, isn't it? And the other thing that really struck me, and it might be slightly insensitively done, but this is a place where all cultures are welcome.
1981 advert is perhaps one of my favourites. One, because it's got some of the goodies in it who'd recently left the BBC. It's got a big panto theme, and there's Chinese ribbon dancers throughout it, and they're playing Skeletric at one point. So although they're not famous in their own right, I love the idea that they're not just there as, the sort of dancers. They're part of they're getting stuck in and enjoying the products. In that sense, I agree. I think it's celebrating diversity.
I've put 2 stars by my notes for 1981 because I think that is the acme. Yeah. That is the greatest one that they ever did. It's got the best jingle, and it's interesting because you can hear them sort of working towards what the jingle is going to be. But then when you get to the Have a Cracking Christmas, which we've already heard, that is, you can't really get better than that. And it has a phrase, a cracker of a Christmas shopping spree. And advertising nowadays is never going to talk about shopping sprees, is it? I think that would be seen as quite vulgar in sort of straitened time, this idea that we all suddenly go nuts and start splashing the cash around.
Well, I was thinking back to my happiest memories of children, of being a child at Christmas. And along with some of the TV, the memory that comes to mind is going to Superdrug for the first time on my own at some point in the mid to late 70s when I was allowed to go to shops on my own, and looking at all the little bottles of bath salts and thinking how exciting it was. So our consumer spree was based on pretty small budgets. We weren't splurging on genuine designer labels. It was all very much more modest. I'd also single out the 1982 advert, which has an Alice in Wonderland theme, which is done really well.
Christmas Wonderland at Woolworths, so many things to choose from, come and see.
And I quite enjoyed seeing some of the costs. I think there's a Commodore computer for £139.99, which doesn't sound like that much money now, but at the time would have been phenomenal. But you could buy that at Woolworths alongside, a cheap, doll or, something like a box of crackers.
Yes, and actually 82, there's a hint of modernity coming in there because we have David Kidd Jensen, who sort of, he's a new signing for that year. And I noticed then in 83, we then got Peter Powell, he's also along as if like David Jensen sort of dropped the rope ladder down to the Radio 1 consortium, and now they come up. The other thing I find genuinely admirable about this, but is the kind of the nifty rhyming. So in 1979, because they've got to pack in a lot of info.
Blank cassette from EMI with vouchers for the cinema, or a food mixer, 3-speed with stand and bowl. A Polaroid 1000, it's a self-developing camera. A home pack unit, look what it will hold.
Just getting your tongue around that, I mean, it's so ambitious, isn't it?
Yeah, and you think about all the care that went into writing them, which makes them all the more interesting that they were stopped for a reason, weren't they, Graham?
In 1984, following their Joe Brown circus-themed production for Christmas 1983, ABM were let go, when research showed that while people liked and even looked forward to the ads, which we both certainly did, all they remembered afterwards were the personalities who appeared and not the products. So Woolworths ditched the spectaculars and put the products in pride of place. That was the end of the wonder of Woolworths, unfortunately, at Christmas. But I mentioned Steve Berry there, and thanks again for all his research work. But he's also curated a YouTube playlist of all those glorious Woolies Christmas ads, which we'll include in our show notes.
So for our final selection of Christmas viewing, we are joined by writer, actor, director Mark Gatiss. Merry Christmas, Mark.
Merry Christmas. God bless us.
Mark's Ghost Story for Christmas this year is an adaptation of E.F. Benson's The Room in the Tower, and it will air on BBC Two over the festive fortnight. It stars Joanna Lumley and Tobias Menzies, and it tells the story of... Well, fill us in. What does it tell the story of?
Oh, it's about a man who has a recurring dream all his life where he is taken to a big house to meet the family by a man he was at school with called Jack Stone, and he meets Mrs. Stone, the matriarch, who says, "Jack will show you your room. I have given you the room in the tower." And when he goes to the tower, there's something terrible there, but he always wakes up before it happens. And then one day, the dream comes true.
I love the always waking up before it happens. There's already a sense of the deja vu play. I'm thinking of Dead of Night.
Well, I think Benson had a recurring dream. I think it was based on something, and they tend to be like that, don't they? And then the most bizarre thing, genuinely, is I just asked Joanna Lumley if she'd do it, and she did it for tuppence, and she was so fantastic. But only later did I realise she's called Mrs. Stone, so she could actually be Patsy Stone's haunted grandmother.
So you're part of the AbFab expanded universe.
It's the AbFabiverse.
Yes. And what did you have to do to get this one on its feet? Because sometimes with these stories, you normally have to add as kind of another layer, don't you?
Yes. Well, it's there's a framing device. Tobias plays the man, Roger Winstanley, and it starts in the war in a tube shelter during the Blitz. and he tells his story to Nancy Carroll. And that's the way I decided to do it, because it's a first-person story. And I just thought these things, just pop into your head. And I thought, this is rather rich. I love the atmosphere of the tube anyway, but particularly during the war. And I thought, this is quite nice. He's sort of unburdening himself to a stranger the way you do. But then actually, because he's had this dream since he was 16, there are sort of time slices, which are lovely things to do. So each different version of the dream is a different period, and the people age within it, and some of them die off. It's really, I'm very, very pleased with it. It's genuinely creepy, I think. And as ever, people, just went the extra mile so much. And Dame Jo, just golden.
What's the balance between creepiness and Christmas joy in a ghost story?
Some of it is editorial, in that, I've never had to take anything out that was going too far in that sense. But it's, as I always come back to what M.R. James called a pleasing terror. That's why he wrote his stories to be read on Christmas Eve. It sort of gives you a pleasant frisson. And yet some of his stories particularly are extremely nasty. And he always said his ghosts must be malevolent. He had no truck with kind ghosts or anything like that. So with Benson, which is a different kettle of fish, really. But I just thought, in a way, you are the thing itself is sort of inherently a bit of a comfort blanket, and you have all the joy of the Christmassiness of the costumes and the period setting. But within it, there are some really quite ghastly things. So for me, I feel like I get the balance between those, because the Ghost Story for Christmas is in a way a kind of heritage brand, that you're already taking some of that on board. But within it, I think I try and push the envelope quite a lot.
So now let's unpeel the sorry sullen Satsuma in your Christmas stocking of TV viewing.
Watch out! Where'd he go? It's that darn cat.
That cat.
That was a trailer for Disney's 1965 film That Darn Cat, directed by Robert Stevenson and starring Hayley Mills. It's a story of a kidnapping that's foiled in part thanks to an adventurous Siamese cat. I had never seen this film, and I assumed because it had Hayley Mills and Dean Jones was in the Herbie films, I thought it would be fun. So why is this a terrible choice for Christmas? When was it on?
Well,
I can tell you when it was on.
Oh, good.
I have tabulated this, okay. So it's popped up on television several times.
Yes.
Most recently at 10:05 in the morning on BBC Two on the 21st of December 2008. It also aired as part of ITV's Christmas Morning in 1991. But I wonder if this is where you came across it. It was featured on Christmas Day editions of Disney Time in 1970, but also right back in 1965. So what is your problem with this, scheduling this at Christmas?
Oh, it's a folk memory. That bloody film, that darn film, feels to me like it was all the time. Jeremy Dyson and I have a thing about it. And it's not so much that one as what it typifies, which is what I call the wrong film. And it's not necessarily Christmas, although it really spoils Christmas, because what you want is for it to be Journey to the Centre of the Earth.
Yes.
Or Zulu.
Yeah.
Or Ice Station Zebra. That's Christmas, right? And That Darn Cat and Candle Shoe and The Cat from Outer Space and The Spaceman and King Arthur and I would even say something like Herbie Goes Bananas are symptomatic of a kind of Disney or Disney-esque family film, which even as a child made me heave.
Why? Why do those kinds of films really annoy you?
Well, because they don't have monsters in. They are faux cookie, particularly faux British. Candle Shoe is a Jodie Foster film where she inherits an English estate.
That's right.
And there's something about that early to mid 70s Disney gloss. Bedknobs and Broomsticks has it. I love the film, but the whole British section is as fake as Angela Lansbury's accent. It's something off about it. And even as a child, I didn't like it. I've also never liked things largely which are from the child's point of view, and I think children generally don't like. We're always being told, but I would rather watch good adults than terrible children. CF Harry Potter.
These are the kind of things also I feel that you would see on Screen Test, aren't they?
Yes. Which of course leads us back to the Children's Film Foundation, the most depressing part of Screen Test, and which we all, and what you wanted was a clip. You wanted a clip from Mary Poppins because it was magical.
Yes. The first film to air on Christmas Day on the BBC television service in 1949 was David O. Selznick's Little Lord Fauntleroy. Good film, good choice.
I don't know the Selznick.
Okay,
It's in the area we're talking about because it doesn't have monsters in it. And it's a bit... But then, you see, we could talk all day.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should. But there's something to me intangible about Christmas scheduling, which doesn't work any other time of the year. For some reason, documentaries about Indian railways are intensely Christmassy. I watched a documentary a couple of years ago about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, which somehow or other was so Christmas. It was a History Channel. It was really fascinating. It was about a possible photograph of him on his deathbed, and you've seen it. It's an amazing documentary. But because it was on at Christmas, I thought, I don't know why, but this is exactly what I want to watch on Boxing Day. Why is that?
Yeah.
So some of these films, like Little Women, which you might think slightly blur into the that darn cat area, don't, because they have something inherently festive in them.
Well, it begins. I mean, it's one of the great Christmas openings, isn't it?
Of course there is that, but it's also it's a wonderful story. I don't know. It's not a finite. It's not an exact science.
And the other thing, I wonder what your take is on The Great Escape, because actually it never aired on Christmas until 2001. That's a Christmas film.
I think it was an Easter film.
Do you?
Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful film.
Yeah.
But I think it is about 48% responsible for all the problems this country has at the moment, because it has been fetishized. People who watched it at Christmas or Easter now believe they fought in the war. And it's a fantastic film, but there is something about all that. This is a very different conversation. The absolute fetishization of World War II, which into an entertainment, which has led us to this pass, I think. And it's a great shame, because it's a wonderful film. I mustn't blame it entirely. Poor John Sturges.
It is time to unwrap Mark's favourite Christmas show.
That was The Ghosts of Motley Hall, and the opening episode to its second series. The instalment was titled The Christmas Spirit and aired on ITV at 5:35 p.m. on Christmas Eve 1976.
And we actually mentioned this series last month in our conversation about Rent-A-Ghost. Similarly themed, Ghosts of Motley Hall debuted in April of 1976, was created by Richard Carpenter for Granada Television, who of course previously brought us Catweasel and would later create HTV's masterful Robin of Sherwood. This series for children, starring Freddie Jones, Arthur English, Sheila Stiefel among others, followed 5 ghosts from different eras in history who now haunt the abandoned Motley Hall.
In this episode, it's Christmas Eve, and just as the ghosts are ruining the fact that they will not be able to partake in any seasonal revelry, Motley Hall takes them back in time to 1848 and a Christmas celebration from Ghost Sir George's childhood. Now, watching this, I knew Motley Hall. I haven't really watched a lot of it before. Watching this, it feels like it's the seminal text in Mark Gatiss's career. There's so much of you in this, I felt.
It might be, you know.
Tell us why.
I watched it again last night and I wept.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I watched the series again a few years ago. It was on DVD when Network broke down, and I watched it just straight through, and I was so thrilled to discover it was as good as I remember.
Yeah.
What I wasn't prepared for was how moving it was. It's obviously Richard Carpenter, a god, I think, just so inventive. Catweasel I adored as a child, but there's something about this collision, this idea. It's inherently melancholy, of course it is, but it's a lot of fun, very witty, clever idea that goes from different times. Obviously, it's proven popular elsewhere. But there's something, it's folksy, that's what it is. And I think that going back to that darn cat, it's what I always...
What do you mean by folksy?
It's sort of, I don't know, Richard Carpenter and his co-producers, they felt they were onto something with Catweasel and this, and then Robin of Sherwood, that they were actually mining a sort of English British tradition, which was very much anti-gloss and anti-American in that. So it was something, we're reclaiming something. And I feel like it's at the heart of this. It's full of clever wordplay, and the characters are absolutely wonderful. You know, I only realised last night watching it again that Sir George Uproar is probably from his General Uproar, which of course is a term. Yes. George Uproar. It's a brilliant name, and it's so him, isn't it? So Freddie.
But I have to confess, I don't think I ever watched The Ghosts of Motley Hall as a child, even though I was exactly the right age for it. And I was, like you say, Mark, captivated by how well it holds up. And the couple of things that really jumped out at me was the way that there is this remarkable deja vu thing when the General encounters his childhood self coming down and realises that he saw himself as a ghost as a child, and that sense of a loop of time, which is magical and very eerie. But also there is that moment when they just pause and they celebrate Christmas, when the carol singers come in, the mince pies come round, and you as a viewer, whether you're a child in a lovely family or a child watching on your own in perhaps not a very nice domestic setup, you're suddenly given a sense of what real Christmas feels like.
Absolutely.
And allowing the time for that, a couple of minutes of airtime.
In 28 minutes, I was very struck how much is packed. You know, it has quite a boisterous, forgive me, rent-a-ghosty start where they're all shouting because the Christmas sprite is sort of setting them against each other. What I found remarkable is how quickly within that short running time, they carve out this bit where Sir George meets his younger self, and it's magical. And then the thing that really got me at the end is after the carol singing and the time travel vision fades away, and they're left in this dark blue lighting, just the ghosts.
Yes,
and
the dust sheets.
And Freddie Jones lifts up the Christmas stocking.
My friends, my very dear friends.
That's the end of the episode. I went to bits.
And Freddie Jones, he's the definitive blustering, loquacious Victorian. I mean, apologies to Christopher Benjamin, but he really is, isn't he? Don't you think?
Yeah, I know. He was only 50.
Yeah.
I looked it up last night. I was like, oh my God.
He looks ancient.
Yeah, of course.
Do you think kids would have got what was going on when he met his 10-year-old self?
Oh dear. There's such a lot I'd like to tell you, Georgie. The good times we'll have. And the disappointments too, of course.
Disappointments?
Yes, we all get those. And there'll be times when you... But you must discover it all for yourself. I mustn't tell you.
And look, the sadness where he says, there's such a lot I'd like to tell you. And to the point that he even is looking at this boy and knows how this boy's story is going to end.
Well, I did. I was 8. I was 10.
Yeah.
It's the perfect... I mean, Christmas Eve 1976, that may be the most perfect Christmas I could ever imagine having, because everything was coming together at that time. It was such a great time for telly.
Yeah.
And I love this show. It was on Sundays, as I remember it. I think this episode is really special.
Yeah.
And it's a great, great show. But there's something wonderful about this.
Well, can we talk also about, there's a ghost story within the ghost story. And to me, it's almost an M.R. Jamesian ghost story, because they felled the blasted beach, and when they put this log on the fire, it brings out everyone's worst instincts. Except, unlike an M.R. James thing, it's resolved by kindness coming from Arthur English as well.
You know your trouble. You've been chained to that old beach too long. You've forgotten what it's like to be human. Loving people and forgiving their faults. That's human, see? Not trying to become strong by feeding on unhappiness and stirring up anger.
Well, he says the most gentle sentiments. And he's such a kind of a brusque, robust kind of actor. I found that really surprising.
It's full of wonderful opportunities for a brilliant cast. I've met Nick Leprevo a few times, and I always talk to him about Ghosts of Motley Hall. It's like giving a late review to someone, but it's just amazing. To me, it's a tangible link to this very special thing all those years ago. But the whole point about Arthur English's character is how, you know, he's a fool who died of influenza because his master kept throwing him in the moat, and But the spirit in the log is a boy who fell from the tree and has never been able to leave.
If you were making something like this now, you would show the boy. You would see his manifestation and you'd see a happy ending. There is no urge to do that. His spirit is released and he leaves, but we never see him. And you think, what happened to him?
Who knows? It's probably budgetary, but it's actually very effective.
It's more
because
effective.
It's so simple and it's quite creepy. That you just have candles going out and the door slamming, isn't it? And
but as you say, anywhere.
It's just boiled down so quickly into a sitcom slot. You get the setup with the last uproar, the relative who's come from Thailand to take pictures.
Yes, beautiful as well. It's like a bookend, isn't it? Yeah.
Peter Sallis. Then you get the time travel flashback. Then this incredible section with Freddie Jones and his childhood self, the Christmas Carol, and then the revelation that there is another ghost who's come into the house, and Arthur English says, "Off you go."
Yeah,
and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I wondered how far there was something tangible about the social and economic climate of Britain apparent in this episode, when it's the idea of people selling off their assets, these old homes that are considered, worthless wrecks. Let's pull it down. Let's just get the money.
That's in a lot of telly at that time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of children's television. There's a lot of brutalism in every sense. There's a lot of dystopia, which we all grew up with, and was kind of the fashion, the changes and Noah's Castle. Yeah. And there's a lot of very bleak visions of the future, which always seem to be filmed in car parks or around the South Bank. But a rejection of the past, and which I think is what Richard Carpenter is very keen to preserve in a sort of Alan Garner-ish way of or an M.L. James way, that there is more to this, and this lineage is worth preserving and very much celebrating. I mean, I just think there's so much gorgeous stuff. That Arthur English's oath is Gloriana, which is what they called Elizabeth I, and there's so many beautiful little details.
There's a reference, isn't it, about the 12 days where he would be Lord of Misrule, and just getting that kind of
exactly.
jargon
It's that lovely thing, which I think all the best children's writing does, of opening a little window onto research that is not banging you over the head, but makes you as a kid go, what does that mean? I mean, we all did it. Then you go and look it up because it's sort of enticing, isn't it?
So I sort of glibly said it's kind of like the source code for you and your work. Could you see yourself in that? And could you see, I mean, there's a real economy which you have to do, particularly with the Christmas ghost stories. I was really struck by the fact that this isn't languid, is it? It goes along. I think the pace is quite a modern pace.
Yeah.
What have you? So did it surprise you when you revisit it and think, oh, I do. I've drawn on that, and this has influenced me.
Maybe not so much because I watched it about 10 years ago. I watched them all again, but I would like to think it's as with Pertwee's Doctor Who, and he used to say to the writers, "Give me a moment of charm," and I think it's palpable in Doctor Who and very much in this that's what I think I like to think I've tried to draw on, because it means so much to me, and also I think to the audience that you can have it's moments of quiet within quite a rapid narrative, or it's sort of time out of mind, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's just so refreshing. And that doesn't mean that everything is going super fast and no one has an attention span. I hate all that. I was sent something the other day, someone saying that thing about, which is approaching the level of an urban myth, that there is a directive to make dialogue simpler because people are on their screens.
Yeah.
Show me the directive. And if it does exist, which probably does somewhere, then the programs that come out of it are shit.
Yes.
That does not mean it's happening all over the place. It's certainly not happening on Bookish. Nobody's telling me to make the dialogue less complicated or intriguing, And I just think we can have it all. You can have a super fast action narrative, but you can also have within it moments of proper quiet and charm. And I think people definitely still respond to that.
And what about that word you use, folksy? So are you tapping into that as well? The same thing that Richard Carpenter did?
Not in a conscious way. Folk horror is now everywhere. But I think there's something really lovely and appealing about that sort of, it's a shorthand I think we all respond to, and you can see it in all kinds of things. In the 70s particularly, it became just it's almost like the same spirit as The Good Life. There's a back to earth pull in the face of technology and the oil crisis. And
you had the whole ESP fascination going on in society at large. You had Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. So Folksy kind of taps into that side of it, where people took it quite seriously as well.
As they are now. And I think in a similar way, it's because the world is very frightening. So people retreat to something where there appear to be rules, and also it hints at something other, which is kind of appealing, because the world is actually too frightening to face. So it's easier to then go into a conspiracy theory about Richard III or the moon landings, because you then feel like you're part of a clever gang who know what's going on. Whereas in fact, it's all howling chaos. And that's a terrifying thing to face. And I think in the 70s, because we all thought, this is it, isn't it? It's either a bit later on, but it's either nuclear Armageddon or we're going to run out of oil. There are too many people. There were so many warnings.
Rabies, Dutch elms disease, all that.
Most of them on BBC One. Yeah. So if you pulled, they never did Dutch elm disease.
No, they should have.
Imagine that, Robert Holmes, 6-parter. And then the pull back to the old ways, to not the good old days, but Merry England, the forest, the Green Man, ghosts. It sort of makes sense, doesn't it? I think.
So on Christmas Day, what would be your viewing? What would you sit down to watch?
This year?
Yeah.
Oh, well, these days, of course, you sort of have to create your own schedule.
Yeah,
I've done that many times. I remember about 20 years ago, literally lining up DVDs and making it up, starting with the Red Shoes at 6:45. That sort of thing. But if you're lucky, there is still someone in there who knows what's going on, who will put Himalayan Railways on early, followed by a documentary about Albert Schweitzer or something like that, followed by David O. Selznick's Little Lord Fauntleroy, followed by Journey to the Centre of the Earth, and then the equivalent of Disney Time. That's not just nostalgia. That's the art. Another conversation. That's the art of scheduling, which I think we all miss hugely, because what we want is to sit down for someone to have curated our evening for us, because we can't make a decision. So if you drag something back from your atavistic past and think, what would I like to see? You can sort of now do it yourself. It's one of the great advantages of being a grown-up.
Mark Gatiss, thank you so much for stepping through the square window with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Next month, let's all meet up in the year 2000 as we look at programming from the dawn of the 21st century.
That means the New Year's Day special of Coronation Street, Blue Peter digging up the time capsule they buried back in 1971, the very first episode of Dom Jolly's Trigger Happy TV, and the dawn of reality TV with the BBC's Castaway 2000.
I was crazy about Castaway 2000, so I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. But if you've got your own thoughts on these shows or anything from today's episode, please drop us a line on email@squarewindow.co.uk.
Goodbye! And have a very Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas. Oh, that sounded wholesome. Thanks for listening to our Christmas 2025 edition of Through the Square Window.
This was a Square Window production with music by local teenagers.
Our podcast logo was designed by Stuart Manning.
Do subscribe and tell other people about us. And if you're moved to, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts.